John, I have confided to you almost as if you're my cosmological psychiatrist.
Your guru.
That as a child, I was actually scared of the concept of why there's not nothing, because suddenly it occurred to me that maybe there should have been nothing, and there is, and maybe to go back to that. I didn't know what, but it was really a petrifying thought. When you think about that question, I know many people now would say that the question, why isn't there nothing, is a meaningless question, and dismisses it that quickly. How does that work?
Well, one thing they might be saying is that there can't be absolute nothingness. There have to be at least possibilities, there have to be mathematical truths and so on. There didn't have to be a universe, there didn't have to be any really existing things. But it's absurd to try to get rid of absolutely everything getting rid of all ethical facts, all mathematical facts, maybe trying to get rid of time. Some people would say time has to continue ticking away even if no universe is there. That I take very seriously. Other people want to say there's some sort of contradiction in the idea of there being nothing.
Because nothing is not a thing.
That's one of the ways it goes. Another way goes, if you're talking about the possible absence of everything, you have no truth maker to make it true that it's possible that everything be absent. But they have the slogan, this is very popular among philosophers these days, that truths always require truth makers, and truth makers must be in the end existing things. So that if you want to talk about the truth of a law of physics, for example, you have to have actual particles going around and obeying the law of physics, otherwise you're not talking about anything.
And by virtue of the concept of nothing, you can't have a truth maker, because the truth maker be part of the something.
Yeah, they say that talking about nothing as if it could be a reality is doing the sort of thing which you find in Lewis Carroll, where the question is, what happened to nobody if he overtook you on the road? You've just told me that nobody overtook you in the road.
Yeah.
Well, why didn't he arrive first?
How does the so-called subtraction argument work to try to get at nothing?
Well, the subtraction argument works that we can imagine things going out of existence one by one.
This chair disappears, I
in
disappear.
the end, there'd be nothing. I think this argument, if it were correct, would give terrible problems to the cosmologists, because some of them think of huge numbers of separate universes which might each one suddenly pop out of existence. And you'd have to have something very odd going on with the physics if the last universe suddenly couldn't pop out of existence. How would it know that it couldn't pop out of existence?
Well, how does that work, though? I mean, why couldn't it pop out of existence?
Well, I think it could. They think it couldn't. They think there'd be some sort of contradiction there. But if there was a contradiction, who's telling that universe that there'd be a contradiction?
Well, why do they think there's a contradiction? Because if you lose that universe,
Because they have this view that all truths must be truths about existing things. And if you have a blank, there's no truth about the blank.
Okay.
You know?
But the issue is, how does the last one coming out of existence, could have been anyone? How does it know which is the one that has to preserve?
How does it know that it's the last one there? That's how I'd...
Yeah.
One trouble about this area is you get into terrible abstractions, and the arguments get terribly complicated. And I think one way of dealing with complicated arguments is to tell little stories and get people on your side. And the story I tell is the story of the different universes popping out of existence. And I say, do you really mean this last one couldn't do so? it has proved more persuasive than writing a long paper.
The argument that I have found difficult to deal with is the concept that nothing is not a thing, and we're using the term as a thing. So maybe there's a language confusion that's built into the question. And so when I'm worrying about why not nothing, I am worrying about a meaningless question.
Well, probably the only answer you could give to that is, by definition, nothing is not a thing, so why are you worried?
Well, I'm not worried to begin, but people tell me I should be worried because if you can't describe nothing as something that's existing, like there is nothing, that's a meaningless concept.
The answer to that would be, we can describe it without actually falling into contradiction. And then we'd have to look at the descriptions, and unfortunately the arguments very quickly run out here. I found this is very common in the case of philosophy. You make a point, and the other person doesn't accept it. And then what do you do next? In this case, the point is, well, surely there's no contradiction in a blank, because in a blank there's nothing to contradict itself. Mm-hmm. And the other person says, well, yes, there's a contradiction here, because you're supposing that it could be really the case that there was a blank, but reality always involves things. Or the person would say, there's a contradiction here because God has to exist. Mm. And you're supposing the contradictory situation of God being possible, but God not existing. When you hit these counter-arguments, you ask for more details. You say, well, where is the contradiction in God not existing? And suppose that the answer comes to you, oh, well, we don't know enough about that. We're too humble to know this. It's too much of a mystery, but it's essential to our faith, and so on.
And that ends the conversation.
Tends to. Philosophy is a very difficult and frustrating field, and I wish I'd been a novelist instead. One way in which people react to the question, why is there a universe, is to say there's no problem because there's no contradiction even in a universe not being there for infinite time and then suddenly a universe popping into existence. You can describe that without describing anything like a round square. You haven't contradicted yourself. And a great British philosopher, David Hume, in his first work, which was written at a tremendously early age, he was something like 20 when he wrote it, put forward this as a possible answer to why there's a universe. Well, it just popped into existence. Later on, he wrote dialogues concerning natural religion. And you never know what his own views are, because he keeps on talking through the mouths of various characters. But one of the characters has a very interesting argument, which says that at every moment, the existence of things is explained by the fact that things were around the moment before that. And that has been taken up in recent times by another great philosopher, Bertrand Russell, in his debate, a very famous debate with Father Copleston. Copleston defending the view that there has to be a God behind the universe, Russell saying that the universe is just there, and that's all. And Russell is willing to take seriously, this was in the days before the Big Bang had been invented, or at least before it had been confirmed. Russell was willing to take seriously the idea that there was an infinite sequence of events, and each situation in the sequence was explained by the situation before, all the way back to infinity. And he thought this simply removed the problem of why there's a world. Copleston took the view that even if you had an infinite chain, you should ask why the chain is there. I myself think that Copleston was right on this. If you had an infinite series of geometry books, each copied from the one before, there'd be the question, why are these books about geometry? And this is not just me talking, this is Leibniz, who was a great philosopher. He made this argument in 1697.